PermaSeal insertion valve installation video guide. Mounting the valve casing on the water main. Lower the top and bottom casings into the ditch. Mount the bottom casing on the pipe. Place proper support under the bottom case. Insert the side gaskets into the bottom casing. Insert the alignment bushings into the counter bores of the bottom case. Place and align the top casing onto the bottom casing. Fasten the two sleeves together. Trim protruding side gasket ends at the mechanical joint and valve body sealing surfaces. Install the split mechanical joint gaskets and glands on both ends of the sleeve. Insert the O-ring into the groove on the top casing and thread the angular bolts into the top casing until they are flush with the inside wall. Pressure testing the casing assembly. Position the pressure test plate assembly into the top casing assembly. Tighten the angular bolts into the test plate to the product's torque values. Conduct a water pressure test to established pressure and time criteria using the ports provided on the test plate. The mechanical gland gripper nuts may be twisted off at this time. Back out the angular bolts until they are flush with the inside wall. Remove the O-ring and test plate. Remove the angular bolts. Make sure that the top casing is covered to prevent debris from entering the product. Pour concrete footer up to the casing flanges. Preparing for the cut. Thread the angular bolts into the top casing. Place O-ring into the gland of top casing. Install and align the bottom adapter onto the top casing flange. Close the fasteners oriented with the nut on top of the flange. Place the O-ring into the gland on top surface of the bottom adapter. Install the knife valve seat side up onto the bottom adapter. Assemble the drilling machine onto the short adapter. Assemble the shell cutter and pilot drill assembly to the cutter hub. Check pilot drill insert and cutter teeth for damage. Also check the pilot drill retaining wires for free movement. Advance the boring bar to attach the cutter assembly. Then retract all the way back into the short adapter. Place the O-ring into the gland in the underside of the short adapter. Install the short adapter onto the knife gate. Open the 1/4-inch air bleed valve on top of the short adapter. Fully open the knife valve. Establishing baseline and making the cut. Lower the cutter until the pilot drill contacts the surface of the main. Retract cutter 1 full turn of the drilling machine's manual crank rotation. Determine total cut distance by measuring the diameter of the main and adding it to the pilot drill offset dimension. Put drilling machine into the auto feed mode and set the cut distance as determined in prior step. Begin the cut. Once fully vented and water escapes, close the 1/4-inch air bleed ball valve on top of the short adapter. Once the cut distance has been achieved, stop the drilling machine. Fully retract cutter into the short adapter. Close the knife valve. Open the 2-inch drain valve on the short adapter to depressurize and drain the water. Prior to assembly, visual identification of the removed section of main pipe by the cutter assembly can be made through the 4-inch stores inspection port. Disassemble the short adapter drilling machine assembly from the knife valve. Evacuating the chips. Insert the chip evacuation rod through the chip evacuation plate. Then attach the retainer nut to the end of the rod. Insert the O-ring in the gland of the chip evacuation plate. Attach the chip evacuation plate assembly to the knife valve. Fully open the knife valve, vent the air, and push the probe to the bottom of the casing assembly. Open the release valve to begin the flushing process. In sweeping motions, move the rod across the floor of the casing assembly. flushing chips. View progress through the sight glass of chip evacuation plate. Continue until the floor of bottom casing is free of chips. Once clean, fully retract the chip evacuation probe upward and close the knife valve. Disassemble the chip evacuation plate from the knife valve. Inserting valve body assembly. Assemble the valve packing ring onto the valve body and gasket. Remove the valve operating wrench nut. Assemble the guide bracket assembly to the valve bonnet using shoulder bolts, with the valve guide perpendicular to the waterway. Stage the valve body and bracket assembly onto the long adapter. Insert the O-ring in the underside gland of the long adapter. Assemble the long adapter with the valve in it to the knife valve. Fully retract the boring bar and remove the shell cutter assembly. Attach the valve locking rod to the machine boring bar. Assemble the short adapter drilling machine assembly onto the long adapter. The locking rod must be centered to fit between the slots of the valve guide bracket. Manually lower the locking rod until it touches the valve guide assembly. Rotate the locking rod by 90 degrees to engage with the valve guide assembly bracket. Then lift the valve body assembly up off the staged position. Rotate into alignment with the valve guide tracks of long adapter. Prior to opening the knife valve, the 4-inch stores inspection port on the short adapter can be used for visual verification of this step being completed correctly. Verify the 2-inch drain valves and 4-inch stores inspection ports on both adapters are closed tight. Open the 1/4-inch air bleed valve on top of the short adapter. Fully open the knife valve. Once fully vented, close the 1/4-inch air bleed ball valve on top of the short adapter. Manually lower the valve body assembly until fully seated, compressing the valve body seal. Advance the angular bolts into the packing rings to the correct torque values. Rotate locking rod by 90 degrees to disengage from the valve guide assembly bracket. Then retract fully into the short adapter. Caution: do not attempt to close the knife valve at this time. Open the 2-inch drain valves on the short and long adapters to depressurize and drain the water. After removing the bolts, disassemble and remove the short adapter, then the long adapter from the knife valve. Caution: do not remove the short and long adapter together. Remove the valve guide bracket assembly. Remove the knife valve. Reinstall the operating wrench nut onto the valve stem. Remove bottom adapter and O-ring. Install the finishing gasket and plate assembly. The installation of the PermaSeal is now complete.